Good morning and welcome to the UCLan Student Psychology Show. On today's show we're going to be looking at juvenile delinquency in young males and females. In the past there has been much research into this area. People have completed studies and we've examined the national statistics. The statistics in 2009 and 2010 show that of all offences, 60% of them were committed by males 15 to 17. And of all young males, no matter what age, 78% of them committed crimes, compared to just 22% of females. Therefore, this shows that there is a big sex difference. On today's show, we have a lady who would like to talk to us about her delinquent children. So we'll welcome Jane to the show. Hi Jane, how are you today?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you. I've been having a few problems with my teenage children. I have a daughter who's 13 years old and a son who's 15. My daughter has been thieving and my son has been taking drugs and getting into fights. I just don't know what to do anymore. They're so uncontrollable.
Well, thanks for coming on the show today, Jane. But you'd be surprised to know how common this issue actually is. You need to think about the causes of their behaviour and why the children have been acting this way. We'll start with the family, shall we? So how did you discipline when they were growing up?
Well, from an early age they started acting up, so I tried to control this by grounding them and not letting them out to see friends for a few days. You know, I took the favourite stuff off them, but with working so much I rarely had time to fully and frequently enforce this. Just nothing seemed to work.
Right, so really you used quite strong discipline, but it did seem to be quite inconsistent, is that right?
It is.
Right, well, in a study by Ogders, who's a psychologist, in 2008, it was found that delinquent girls were likely to experience harsh and inconsistent discipline. So this could explain why your daughter has been acting in such a way. But it's important to remember that, you know, discipline is necessary, so it's quite difficult. Was you aware about these effects?
No, I didn't have a clue. I'm quite upset that my actions have directly impacted on them.
I wouldn't feel in that way because there are many other factors that can contribute to the delinquency. For example, education and performance at school. Why don't you tell me about your children's performance in education?
Well, my daughter's always done well. She gets good grades and she seems to enjoy being at school. Apart from when she's had a bicker with her friends, but that's soon resolved. It's just normal girl stuff. My son, on the other hand, well, that's a different story. He has struggled with his reading from an early age and has never really excelled. Teachers have told me he's got a low IQ and I frequently get phone calls saying that he doesn't pay attention, but he's more bothered about messing around with friends than doing any classwork.
Right, so here we can see that your daughter is influenced by her peers, but she still does get on with her classwork. However, your son, it seems to be different for him. We'll first start with your daughter though. In a study by Moffat in 2004, it was found that delinquent girls and boys were likely to be affected by their peers, which could explain why they were behaving in such a way. But with your son, you mentioned his IQ and his reading. Well, Moffat also found that delinquent boys were likely to have a low IQ and they were likely to have poor reading. So this could explain why your son isn't excelling at school, just due to his inability to be able to complete the work that's been set. So he passes his time being disruptive and trying to just get involved in other stuff because he can't do the work.
Oh right, so him having a low IQ, that's contributing to his delinquency at school, is it?
Well, yeah, as well as like with the other factors such as the discipline, but it could be one of the factors, yeah. There's also other factors. How's your children act angrily, or they easily become frustrated, or?
My daughter's never actually been in a physical fight, but recently my son's been suspended from school for having fights with another pupil. I do think he is a bit of a fighter, to be honest.
Well, yeah, this is common with males. It seems to be two primary factors which can help understand antisocial behaviour and aggression. These are lack of constraint and negative emotionality. Antisocial behaviour is predicted by lack of constraint and high negative emotionality. And this was found in a study by Moffat, who found that antisocial males were more likely to show lack of constraint, high negative emotionality than antisocial females.
I don't really really understand what you mean by lack of constraint and higher negative emotionality.
Right, well, high negative emotionality is when a person is more likely to become angry or anxious in a situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And when the lack of constraint is like the inability to hold back your emotions, and like they just tend to lash out and easily become aggressive. So this could explain why your son's starting fights, because he's struggling to cope with his emotions and he doesn't know what to do with them, so instead he's just lashing out.
Yeah, he has always had problems coping with his emotions, and he's always picked facts with other pupils at school. Thank you for that. It's really helped me understand some of the reason why my children are acting the way they are. Is there any advice you could give me in order to help them?
Well, let's just look at the overall picture first. So we've seen that your daughter is more likely to be influenced by discipline and also her peers, but she seems to be alright in education. She's not really been affected, and she's quite calm and she's not really been affected by anger either. So in order to help your daughter, you could just talk to her about her peers and just explain that, you know, although they are a big impact on her life, that she doesn't need to give in to peer pressure, and if her friends are being delinquent, then she doesn't need to follow them, and she can say no. Do you agree with that, or?
Yeah.
Yeah? Well, as for your son, he seems to have been influenced by peers and discipline, but the majority of his behaviour could be explained by his intelligence and his personality, which seems that your daughter doesn't have these factors. In order to help him in the future, you could help him with his anger by talk to him, just let him talk about his feelings and the problems he's facing. You could talk to a school and get him involved with a school counsellor. There are many therapies that they can do for him. They can talk about his issues and, you know, if he's getting into any trouble at school and how he can cope with his feelings, you know. So, yeah, talk to school and make them aware that you want to do something about it. Does that sound alright?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. I'll definitely be getting onto the school. You've been a great help.
Oh, no problem at all. Thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been very interesting talking to you. And I hope I've helped you in some way and given you an idea of where to go next. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Alright, listeners, well, I hope you enjoyed that. But just to extend on the conversation I've had with Jane, we're going to look at the personality traits in males and females and explain, you know, from a psychologist's point of view, why this could happen. Well, we've got the first, the frustration-aggression hypothesis, and this looks at how that aggression is a result of negative effect, which is caused by adverse events. So, if males are more prone than females to experience higher levels of negative effect, then they are also more prone to aggress. And this could help support and understand the sex differences, because males have been found to have higher negative emotionality than females. Another theory we've got is the self-control theory, which explains the gender differences in antisocial behaviour being due to males having less control than females. This again supports the understanding and the sex differences, as males tend to have less constraint than females. So, although personality factors are a big influence, they don't explain antisocial behaviour fully. And there are other factors. These are intelligence, peers and discipline. We've talked all about these with our guest on the show. Okay, so thanks a lot to our guest, and she's given us a prime example of delinquent use. But as I stated at the start, girls are less likely than boys to be delinquent, and after talking to our guest we can see that this may be due to many factors. But to fully understand the sex differences, I think more research does need to be done, because in the past a lot of it has just been based on males and it hasn't compared males and females. So in the future I think psychologists should try and accomplish this. But it is also important to mention that 75% of young people do not offend, so only 25% do actually offend, and I think that is an important issue. Thanks a lot for coming on the show, to Jane, and thank you very much. Goodbye.